To kick off the session, first of all, my name is Dave Anderson. I'm the Director of Technology for Liberty IT. I'm based here in Belfast. Well, I'm in my house. And Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Mark McCann. I'm a Senior Architect at Liberty IT. Been with Liberty 20 years, but been an advocate and an evangelist for serverless first adoption within the enterprise for quite some time.
Cool. So we're going to kind of just, in a fairly kind of informal way, just kind of talk through serverless first, and the way we're kind of going to run this session. We're going to kind of work through this board. We're going to maybe spend about the next 10 minutes just giving a quick overview of serverless first and kind of what that means. And then we're kind of going to go into the bulk of the session, where we're going to kind of maybe invite people to throw up a sticky either in the main area down there, and we'll explain as we go through, or even just pop a question or a comment in to either chat on Hopping to, or either chat on the mirror board. So we have 3 channels on the go here. Or if you want to jump in on video and ask a question, by all means, that works as well. But I won't expect anyone to. And then we'll just spend a few minutes at the end, kind of just closing up. This board, we've just created this for this event. So if you want to take a copy of it and kind of digest in your own time, go for it. I'll leave it up here for a day or 2. You can go back in again. So knock yourself out. Everything in here is kind of open source. So first of all, serverless first. Are you really using the cloud? Serverless first is an approach that we are using within Liberty, and it's becoming quite, I would describe it as being a paradigm shift in the kind of software. And it's really, I would say I think the cloud changes every 6 months. And for me, serverless first is kind of like the age of cloud technology. It's also a very topical technology, lots of debate about it, and we can get into that, but I think there's something kind of slightly more fundamental we can get to. So serverless first, are you really using the cloud? So first of all, serverless. There's a really nice article on serverless.com called a manifesto. People, when they hear the term serverless, and this works across AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform, GCP, and people think about it's a Lambda or it's a function, it's a different way of writing your code. It's actually bigger than that. It's an approach to creating software. And there's a really nice kind of 10 commandments here. And it's really about build what differentiates you. So if you're an insurance company, build insurance software. If you're if you're a cheese company, build stuff to do with cheese. It doesn't really matter. Try not to build undifferentiated things that you can rent from somewhere else. Try and go open source API. One thing that's really important, code is a liability. You don't need to write 1 million lines of code to create a website. Write as little as possible. The more code you write, the more risk that you're putting into your system. And then there's a bunch of other things I'll not kind of go through them in detail. And it's really fundamentally about focusing on your business outcomes, not the activity of writing code. And one thing I really like here is deploy as you commit. In yesteryear, you would have had a big, long kind of sequence of going through different environments like a waterfall. You just deploy your changes and test as you go. It's a very different way of writing software. And there's a fantastic book that's out at the minute called Reaching Cloud Velocity, a leader's guide to success in AWS cloud. It's an AWS book, so slightly biased here. And they say, and this could be the same for cloud. While serverless or cloud is championed as, reducing cost, scale, on demand, there's one reason why you should adopt the serverless first approach. And it's basically development velocity. So you move really fast and you don't do the things you don't need to do. It's that simple. It's speed trumps everything else in this regard and in a safe environment. Mark, is there anything you want to add to that kind of spiel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of the things that we've been evangelizing for quite some time is for all of our teams and all of our leaders to have a serverless first mindset and approach. So as you tackle any sort of problem that your business may have, you approach it with this serverless first mindset and approach. So you see, all the commandments that are here, all these sort of pointers that are here. It's really about doing what differentiates you, doing what adds the most business value, and then looking to leverage managed services for everything else. And we're seeing great success with that approach.
Yeah, we could quite clearly talk all day about this, but we'll not. So how does it fit? I think like we're big fans of Simon Wardley and thinking about what's the kind of strategy of, what you're trying to do. And I'll not explain this Wardley map in detail, but there's a nice kind of shape to it. Around the left side, this axis is the Genesis custom build things. Around the right side is commodity. And the value chain goes from top to bottom. So the more valuable things are at the top. So when you think of this kind of black line here, as you're writing your application, there's good practice, there's things that are operating system, there's architecture practice, there's your kind of mean time to recovery. The lower down you get in this stack, the less visible that is to your customer. And really what this kind of map is really telling you is there's things down here that we as engineers may find important that are of very little relevance up here to your application. So many engineers will, fight claw and tooth about what's the best type of compute, this architecture practice over that. It doesn't really matter. Once you get up to the top of that stack, if you're using technology that abstracts that away from you, then you can go fast and you can pick up a lot of good practice for free. So it's really it's the stuff higher up on the stack here that's really going to make a difference for your customer. And the stuff down the bottom is important, but don't spend all your time kind of worrying about it.
And it's critical here that you understand who your users are, what their needs are, and what's the minimum amount of software and technology that you can bring to bear to meet those needs. And that's the serverless first mindset approach.
Cool. So if there's any questions as we go, please jump in. I mean, this is kind of, again, we'll do a wee spiel here to get us kind of landed. But so one of the things that we believe is really important is, what about my company? XYZ, our engineering team, this is how we operate, blah, 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 blah. There's one thing that Simon Wardley has done, which is quite interesting. He talks about this universal doctrine, which is it's a bit grandiose, but it's actually pretty solid. He's got these kind of 4 levels that he talks through, and these are some of the common things that you should be. It's almost like the culture of your company, and these are really important to kind of assess where you are. Mark, do you want to kind of expand on this a bit?
Yeah, and I think there's 4 phases here, right? So the first phase is stopping self-harm. It's really just getting that good situational awareness and understanding where your teams are, where your technology stack is, what your ways of working are, and your agile practices, and what your landscape is really. And we did this whenever I moved to a new area. We went through all of our teams and did a Wardley map for every single area to understand their current situation, to understand their current technology stack, to see where the pain points were, where the impediments were. And then we could see how they could evolve. So first phase, stop self-harm, understand where you are, understand your methods, learn about where your tech stack is. The next phase is around being more context aware, understanding the development processes and practices, bringing in those lean, agile, XP type methodologies and understanding where your teams are with that. It's about being much more effective and efficient. It's about building small teams that are able to move fast. It's about being very iterative and being responsive to the strategy that you're trying to adopt. And then the better for less is really around optimizing your systems, optimizing the flow, getting that autonomy, mastery, and purpose for your teams. It's about trying to build a bigger picture of where your architecture is and where your company is and where your teams are. And then the last phase is around continuous evolution, continuously to evolve, continuously to move up the value chain, continuously to evolve your technology and your tech stack. And a lot of this, what does this matter for serverless? Whenever you're trying to adopt serverless in your organizations or in your teams, you want to be continuously evolving towards serverless, because it's very rare that we're going to get a greenfield opportunity to go all at serverless. So you need to know where you are, know where the blockers are, the impediments are to serverless adoption, and then work with your teams to build those capabilities, to build those enabling things that'll help them reach that serverless nirvana that we all want to get to.
And as you can see, that this is a lot bigger than just Lambda versus Spring Boot type argument that we engineers love to have. I mean, there's a whole company approach here. It's a bit like a kind of a crawl, walk, run type of a deal, and understanding what phase you are. But really, it's about, to summarize it, it's about speed. You could have the best, fanciest, most amazing tech stack in the world. If you can't get features out the door quickly, you're wasting your business's time. It's as simple as that. So the next kind of frame then, just to kind of finish it off, is we've kind of had, serverless, that kind of strategic play of your stack. What about my company? It's why am I here? So why are you actually here working for your company doing what you're doing? And it's not so you can write some kind of amazing code. It's what's the North Star of your company and your team? What are you setting out to do? And this is a framework that we've been using for a while now that we've found super useful. We found great value in this with the different partners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's when we talk to a lot of our teams, we want to work with them so that they can distill down what their North Star is, what that one metric that matters is for them, so that they can work towards that, and they know that with complete transparency that the work they're doing every single day is working towards some sort of key KPI or key input metric that will then influence that North Star. So it's about organizationally understanding what your North Star is, what your company goals and ambitions are, and making sure that linkage is very transparent between where the company strategy is, where the company vision is, and what the teams on the ground are doing. And again, it's linking this all back to the serverless first sort of approach and mindset. It's about how can you leverage serverless first to meet your company's goals and ambitions. How can you leverage serverless to rapidly make an influencing sort of change to that North Star? It's about positioning your teams and understanding where you are today and where you want to be tomorrow. And we've used this very successfully to bring that transparency from the C-suite all the way down to the developers on the ground. They should have that complete linkage between the work they're doing and the business goals and objectives.
And those of you who've been working for it will think, well, this isn't different. It's just like the 5 whys. And while the 5 whys is a great technique, sometimes just sitting asking people why all the time gets quite repetitive and you might get punched. So this is a slightly more, I'd say, constructive way of finding the why. So quick kind of intro there. We've kind of gone through that kind of service. How does it fit? What am I here? So we're going to kind of, that's the kind of intro done. We're just going to go a quick kind of general discussion here, and then we'll summarize at the end. We do have, I'd maybe touch on this slightly just for kind of terminology. I think this is interesting. This is what I call it's the serverless spectrum. A lot of people, when they think of serverless, they think of, oh yeah, that's just Lambda. I can put some code in a Lambda function. I can call it via web service. It executes. I'm done. This is the Lambda piece here in this compute arc. And there's a spectrum from Lambda, which is your pure function as a service, back to Fargate, which is effectively containers on demand, ECS, EKS, which is kind of standard containerization solutions, back to kind of Elastic Beanstalk, EC2, and VM on-prem. Same for databases. You have a Dynamo as a service database or serverless. You have S3, which people don't think is a serverless service, but it is. That's your kind of storage. You have SNS and SQS for notifications and also step functions for orchestration. And then Athena is analytics. These are all serverless offerings. So imagine, we have quite a few projects that are building entire application stacks using these services, and it's an extremely different way of working. You can get to market really quickly in a very reliable, robust, and secure manner. A lot more work doing the on-prem stuff. I'll not guess at a magnitude, but going over to the right here is a magnitude faster than on the left. And there's lots of stuff you do here that you don't even need to think about. So over here.
I think it's that serverless first mindset and approach is what we've been pushing successfully for a number of years now. Is you start with the capabilities on the right hand side and you see if they meet your user needs, if they will meet the solution that you're trying to build. And then if it doesn't quite fit for whatever reason, for performance reasons or security reasons or whatever it may be, you can fall back then to one of the offerings further up to the left on the spectrum. So if Lambda doesn't meet your needs for some capability or some criteria, you could fall back to Fargate. If Fargate doesn't meet your needs, you can fall back to ECS. If ECS doesn't meet your needs, you can fall back to something maybe on-prem, on the mainframe or whatever. So it's that serverless first approach, and it's not just serverless only. You need to be understanding that there are other options to meet that business need that may be a better fit. But we want our teams to do this first and then fall back. And some of the challenges we've had is, well, serverless versus containers is it one or the other? It's not. They're friends. They're not rivals, and they're both great capabilities to help you solve your business problems.
And the more astute of you will say, well, Lambda is actually containers under the hood. Yes, we know.
There are still servers.
Yes. So we'll kind of open it up now. And again, if there's any questions or anything, a couple of Twitter handles there. We have a couple of kind of resources there, which we'll touch on later. We kind of wanted to get into, what does serverless first give me? And this is just really to try and drive a bit of conversation. And if nobody fancies asking a question, Mark and I will happily talk nonsense for the next 40 minutes. So we've kind of thought maybe just to frame it, you have organizational needs. Do you have low cost? Do you have, you want to have a low run cost? What's your quality? What kind of quality requirements or NFRs do you have? High speed. How frequently would you like to deploy to production? Yearly, monthly, weekly, daily, hourly? And then for your customer, what do they think is value for money? What's your kind of business model? From an innovation perspective, what we have found is when you start to go down a serverless route, you can integrate with other kind of fancy services like AI, ML, whatever, a lot easier, and you can build very innovative solutions quickly. You can try things. If it doesn't work, you throw it away. It's a low cost of entry, and then a kind of high satisfaction. You have a lot more analytics and kind of telemetry, so you can really track your user behavior right down to the nth degree. And if there's something that's not working, you can turn around and fix it really quickly. So it's, again, I found it's been a heaven for our product designers and product managers. You can really kind of experiment to a huge degree very quickly. So,
and even on that high satisfaction, because your team has been freed up significantly from the operational burden of looking after servers and patching and maintenance and a lot of that stuff that the serverless approach takes care of for you. Your team have a lot more cycles to focus on business value. They have a lot more cycles to focus on differentiating your company or your business partners. So that high satisfaction is a big factor in the serverless first approach.
So I'm hoping people can, those stickies work. There we go. Guest innovator. Good stuff. So if anybody has a question or anything they want to raise, just either pop something in the chat there or whack up a sticky.
Yep. So the first one coming through, how do you marry the high-speed element with security and governance? Oh, great question.
Oh, that's an hour right there. Do we quote Dora?
Go for it.
Go for it.
Do you have it on the shelf?
Almost.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. So the DevOps research assessment is brilliant because they have the 4 key metrics, which is throughput and stability. And the 4 metrics are deploy frequency. How often do you deploy to production? It's your kind of your lead time. How quickly can you get something into production? And then stability is a mean time to restore or mean time to recover, and then change fail rate. So the theory is, well, one of the things people used to say was you can either go fast or go safely. But what this study, and it was originally the DevOps, the Dora Institute, and they were bought by Google. So they say if you go fast, you can also go safe, because you can deploy so quickly. If you need to redeploy again, if you spot something, then you have that kind of rapid response. So, and then also with something like serverless, who is your operations team? It's AWS or Microsoft or Google. So, if there are issues managing the containers under the hood, you've got, some of the best operations team in the world doing that for you. So, probably the only thing they worry about is if you do something incorrectly. But then if you're deploying so quickly, you can detect it and fix it very, very fast.
There is also an element of, we've been big advocates for the WellArchitected framework to ensure that our teams are going fast, but they're going in a well-architected way, covering security, operational excellence, reliability, performance, and cost optimization. So, you are going fast, but you are baking that security and that governance in, and especially if you have a good CI/CD pipeline, you can have the checks and balances in your pipeline to make sure that your CloudFormation templates, your serverless framework, templates, your CDK patterns are all adhering to your enterprise standards and governance, and they are all complying with the security and compliance and audit sort of requirements that any sort of enterprise would have. So within Liberty, we can go from having nothing to having something deployed in a non-prod environment in about 5 minutes. So, and that's with all of our checks and balances and of a Fortune 100 enterprise, with all the audit, attestation, security, checks and balances in that pipeline. So I think you can go fast with high security and high compliance and governance.
Yeah, and I mean, public cloud, you're never totally secure. It's always a risk. You need to be on top of it all the time. But one thing that I think is fundamental, and I've spoke to a few companies who've done this. If you take a traditional data center mindset on security, that do the perimeter, install a bunch of agents, to have a very traditional way of doing cyber, and then you move to cloud native, where it's very lower blast radius, least privilege, then when you go serverless, that doesn't work. It's very hard to install an agent on a Lambda function that's probably going to run for like a couple of microseconds or milliseconds. It just doesn't work, So often, if you do take that really traditional cyber approach and your dev team want to go serverless, the dev team security will start to clash. So the really hard yard for any organization going truly into public cloud is to get your security team thinking like really cloud native. Look, we were very lucky. We did a lot of work with our security peers and partners years ago, and they've been awesome. But not every company is like that. So I think it's worth sitting down with security. It's a hard journey for some security teams, but I think it ultimately end in a more secure place.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question came through there, Dave, on great session. Are serverless solutions patentable in general? That's a good one.
That's a good one.
I think the underlying.
It's the same with any software. Yeah, it's the same with anything. I mean, serverless makes you can go faster in a way, but it could be the same with if you sit and write something in Java. It's your IP is your solution, So it's however you put that together. I mean, for me, I strong believer and it's part of the code is a liability. The asset is not the code. The asset is the application or the product or the system. That's the asset, and for me, that's the asset that's got the IP. It's not the code. You may copyright the code, but the code's not important. It's the actual thing you're building.
Yeah, and that's it. You can rapidly compose world-class systems that will scale to millions of users using these serverless building blocks. And you can then have your differentiating capabilities layered on top, and that's your patentable element. That's your IP. That's the differentiator for your organization. So how you compose your system with those serverless building blocks, that's the secret sauce that is going to differentiate you in the marketplace, and that would be patentable, I guess.
Another thing, if you I'll just make something up. If you decided that you were going to apply, I don't know, natural language process, sentiment analysis to people on the phone, I don't know, calling some kind of service. If you thought that was a patentable idea, no one had done it, you maybe for a particular industry, you could patent that idea. You could probably build it in 5 minutes with serverless, just linking a couple of services together. So you build it really quickly, but it's the idea comes first.
And there's I know Matthew Dorian responded there in the chat, but also Richard Graham there. But think about the barrier to entry, and this is one of the big game changers we have seen with the serverless capabilities that have come online and the cloud in general. It's democratized these capabilities. Any developer with a credit card can get access to the world-class capabilities that a Fortune 100 company can. So these capabilities have been massively democratized, and a business with a good idea and a serverless first mindset and approach can rapidly get something in the market, can rapidly get that time to value, which is ridiculous. You can get it within days. You can get a properly scalable, secure, responsive application in the market within days with a serverless first approach, and then you're just iterating on value, iterating on differentiating yourselves, and so really the barriers have been removed significantly. It's really about the engineers that you have and making sure they understand this approach and this mindset.
Cool, good stuff. Cheers, man. There's a great quote as well from Andy Jassy saying if Amazon started today, they'd go serverless, but I suppose he would say that.
Yeah.
Any other comments or?
Oh, there's another one coming in. Yep, see that from Matthew Dorian. There's great comment there around the number of experiments you do, the time to innovate, the frequency you can innovate now has, and we're seeing this with our teams, right? In the past you wouldn't be able to do much in a hackathon because you'd be using expensive compute, you'd be using stuff on-prem, you'd be using some of the mainframe cycles. So it was very hard to be innovative. It was very hard to bring together machine learning or AI capabilities into your service solution just for an experimentation. The cost would have been prohibitive. Now those barriers are gone, and so teams are experimenting with capabilities and services that would have been unheard of 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? So they're bringing in OCR, they're bringing in image recognition, they're bringing in machine learning sort of services and capabilities, these managed services that the cloud providers provide, and they're being able to experiment within hours, sometimes in minutes, and seeing how that can add value to their team, add value to their product or their company. So I think that rapid innovation cycle, that flywheel now, if you use this right, you really can get real value really fast.
Yeah, definitely. I did mention that we have a feedback session at the bottom there. So if you've taken notes, you want to stick in some feedback, good, bad, or indifferent, go for it. It's kind of like a rolling feedback. So when I pop something in,
a great one there, Dave, on our serverless functions easily portable between clouds. That's a great one.
Ooh, I wonder if Keith had put that in. Let me ask him. I bet you did. So portability is a fascinating topic between clouds, and the term multi-cloud has been kicking about for a while. And one of the original intents, and I think it's an incorrect intent, is that you'd build this piece of software, you'd run it in AWS. For some reason, AWS would hike their prices, which actually they have never done in their 15-year or 17-year history, and you'd pull this big lever and automatically flip over to Azure or Google, and that'd be great. And you could flip workloads between clouds and be brilliant. That's never ever been done in the history of IT. There's very few companies actually do that. Plus your environment is much more than your workload. There's network setup. There's a whole bunch of other things that make up your system. It's not just your executable. So people tend to talk about multi-cloud as in, we use 365 in Azure for Office and we use AWS for workload. So sometimes you're maybe working with different clouds for different types of problems, which is more what we're seeing. But then one of the fears with serverless, and especially some of the things like Google Functions or Lambda in AWS, is that you write this complex system in AWS, and then you decide to move something to Google, and you can't move your Lambdas. But it's really, and it's not like you're going to take a Lambda function and just copy and paste it in as a Google function, but it's more about what's the cost. So the way to think about it is, and I'd say the answer is no, the functions are not portable. The way to think of it is, if you write your system to be cloud agnostic and use open source, then you're not using any of the native services. That will put a huge burden for having the option to switch, and it's like that kind of that kind of risk options. You have an option, but you may never use it, so it's kind of useless. So what you do is write the thing in Lambda, and if at some point you ever decide for a business reason that you want to switch to a different cloud provider, that's when you take the hit. And if you've designed your system well to be domain driven and broken down, you'll probably migrate it relatively quickly because it's cloud native, and that will be cheaper than actually writing the whole system up front to be cloud agnostic, and the fact that you may never switch.
Yeah, and we use this term a lot, but code is a liability. So if you're building a serverless first solution, you're going to have a lot less code than if you build an on-prem system or whatever, right? So for starters, there's a lot less code to switch, but it is that switching cost, and it's you would just rewrite it with the managed services of that other cloud provider, right? Because you want to be able to take advantage of the true power and the full power of all of these cloud capabilities and services. You don't want to build in abstraction layers that then is your liability. That's your code liability to maintain and patch and secure and update. And it's also from an educational point of view, you need to also think about, well, okay, if we move from Azure to AWS, if we move from Google to AWS or AWS to Google, it's, do you have the skills for that? Do you have the educational grounding? Do all your engineers, are they familiar with it? Do they know the caveats? Do they know the shared responsibility model? Do they know what well-architected looks like in some of these other cloud providers? Because there are some nuances and differences. So
they're consistent, but they're different. If you have a bunch of engineers who are AWS certified and you tell them you're all going to move to Google, I mean, some might think it's great, but it's a learning curve you're advancing into. Plus, the big one here is data gravity. Like, you may rewrite all your functions, but if you've been writing data to a database in AWS, actually moving that is sometimes a lot harder. And then finally, I was going to say, an easier thing is just to contact the cloud provider and say, listen, can you reduce your cost? You're killing me. That's probably an easier thing to do.
So some good comments coming through here, Dave, around what are our thoughts on Kubernetes? That's a good one. Let you go first.
Well, thanks very much. I think Kubernetes technology, there's going to be a huge future in Kubernetes going forward. It will become a game changer. It's taken a while for it to mature. You can kind of see that, and we were talking to Google a few years ago. It's got fantastic potential. But the thing is, it's about making that best choice. You know what I mean? If you've got a certain stack that you can't build in serverless, then you should fall back to Kubernetes. I'm not sure if I would design a brand new system in Kubernetes if I was starting a new build tomorrow. I'm not sure if I'd do that. I need to think long and hard about that. But I think it's an awesome technology, and it's going to make a major difference going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think with the serverless first approach, you would try to embrace the serverless capabilities first, because the time to value, the lower operational burden. But Kubernetes is a fantastic fallback option if serverless doesn't meet your users' needs. Next one, Dave, around Terraform attempts to abstract the cloud provider. Thoughts on this?
I think Terraform is interesting, but I believe that the coding model is quite complex. I prefer CDK, Cloud Development Kit. There's a new standard that came out at the start of last summer. Was it? Yeah, at the start of the summer 2019. The Cloud Development Kit. What I really like about the Cloud Development Kit is you can choose your language, and we've kind of opted to go with TypeScript. You can put it in and have it autocomplete. You're writing TypeScript to create cloud infrastructure assets, and you can unit test that TypeScript to make sure that's created correctly. And then there's really good technique. There's really good support there for what I call sensible defaults. So you'll find yourself writing an infrastructure as code routine for maybe like 20 lines, where it would have been like hundreds, if not thousands of lines elsewhere. So I think Terraform is interesting, but I think it'll get overtaken by CDK.
Yeah, and I think it's some of the same arguments apply around the multi-cloud sort of approach, right? By coding to that abstraction layer, you're losing out on some of the power and some of the innovation and some of the fast feedback loops that the cloud providers are giving us. And as Dave mentioned, we're big advocates for CDK, the Cloud Development Kit. And there's something we can talk about here as well around the patterns. With serverless, there's a number of awesome sort of patterns that you can bring to bear to help us speed your solution. So we've done a lot of work with understanding those patterns, codifying those patterns, and Matt Coulter has been championing through CDK and CDK patterns and bringing those together with the CDK Cloud Development Kit, so that you can build a serverless, well-architected solution in minutes and have it in a deployed environment in minutes. And that's been a big game changer for our teams as well. Around that infrastructure as code sort of piece.
Yeah, we'll hit some of these kind of links as we finish up. Like, CDK patterns is if you're interested in infrastructure as code, that is probably, I'd say, one of the best resources on the internet today, if I can be so bold, like that statement.
Yeah, indeed. What else comes through? Terraform gives you different providers, so possibly worth the overhead. And that's a judgment you can make, and it depends on your workload. And it depends on your product or your offering. If you are offering a capability that you want it to be multi-cloud, then that may be a differentiator for you. For the majority, that's not going to be the case. But again, it's based on who are your users, what are their needs and what's the right capability to bring to bear to meet those needs. For us, the majority of the time, the serverless first approach has been awesome to meet our users and our customers' needs.
Yeah, no, it's something actually. I was talking to a few people in the tech community in Belfast outside Liberty about this over the past year or two, and what I've kind of figured out is if you're working in a company, right, and you're making a tool for developers, or you're making a tool for other companies to use, and then your company is creating a tool, then you actually have a requirement to be multi-cloud, because you want your tool to be available on, let's just say, AWS, Azure, and Google. So you probably need to use something like Terraform to deploy that in all three, or if you're deploying something in all three clouds, which I think is a very real business requirement. And I think if you are in that scenario, then you should think of something like Terraform or even CDK. CDK works across sometimes different providers, but I think like with us, if you're working for a company that you're writing products for end users, then you're better just decide on one provider and go for it. That'll be my advice. Keep things simple. And plus, as well, what I'll quote Keith and Ed here: when you go into an agreement with a cloud provider, you have to provide on-ramps. Did I get that right, Keith? There's a lot of work you need to do to integrate with that cloud provider. You don't get that overnight, So don't underestimate the cost of entering into an agreement with a new cloud provider.
Absolutely, and like Matthew Doran made a great point here. Right? It's about, is it worth it? Is the cost of that abstraction and that sort of portability or flexibility worth all the operational burden that you're bringing upon yourself? Do you want to touch on cost, Dave? Because it typically comes up a lot in your service conversations.
Cost is fascinating. You kind of break it down a couple of ways, I suppose. There's the cost to actually build the application, right? So if you've 3 or 4 developers sitting, so right, let's build an application. Let's start on the 1st of January. Okay, we're done 1st April. That's 3 months. The cost of those engineers for that time. So that's the cost for the build, right? And then you've got the actual run cost. So there's the cost of your application once it's running in production. And we've seen applications costing a couple of grand a month in let's just say legacy cloud options, and we've migrated them over, and they've cost maybe like $2 a month. So you're seeing stuff like a 99% or 98% reduction in run cost is for us is quite normal. So there's actual run cost, and then the third part is probably the maintenance cost. Once that system is actually running in production, how much do you have to spend on maintaining that? And the big thing about serverless, if you've done it right, is you don't have to invest in an operations team to continue to patch servers, to recycle things, to upgrade, versions of Node, versions of whatever you've used. A lot of that is taken care of by the cloud provider. We frequently see notes coming out internally saying Node.js is upgraded. There's a security risk in Node.js has gone from version X to version Y. Everyone, you got to do this. If you're serverless, you don't need to do anything. So so there's those 3 pieces of cost: the build time, the run cost, the cloud provider, and then the maintenance cost. I think it's a really interesting, and one of the things that we have found is that once you're into that, you've got your application built. If your business partner says, can we add something to that application? Can you add a button that does something? You can say, well, it'll take us a week to build that, which is going to cost you X amount of money. The money to actually run that is going to cost you an extra maybe 50 cents a month. How much money are you going to make from that button? And if they say, I don't know, you can say, well, let's test it. If they say, well, it's going to be X, you can say, well, is that will I make more money than it's cost to build it? And if the answer is no, you say, well, let's not build it. So you can be really kind of microscopic on your cost, which is very new for a lot of engineering teams.
Yeah, and even if the cost isn't lower with the adoption of the cloud, with the serverless approach, you have greater transparency into your costs, and it's much more of a factor that teams are aware of around cost. So they're now designing solutions with cost in mind. And as Dave mentioned, it's really so that you can then have that really high value conversation with your business partners about, is it worth it? Is that new feature capability worth it? because we know all the costs from the development costs, the maintenance costs, the licensing costs, whatever, because it's all completely transparent now. So then you can have a rich conversation with your business partners around, well, it's going to cost $10 a week to do this feature. Are you going to bring in more money than $10 a week? If yes, then let's do it. If not, then let's have another conversation. And it gets back to the stuff we talked around the North Star, about understanding your business goals and KPIs, about understanding what the team should be working towards. Our teams must have a much greater understanding of that now, and they have much more autonomy to actually influence the cost of the systems and the solutions they build. So it's about positioning our teams high up the value chain for the business, and serverless has been a great way for us to do that.
Cool, good stuff. I see Matthew talking about the WellArchitected framework. We'll touch on WellArchitected in a second. We'll touch that in a roll, but it's definitely worth looking at WellArchitected. There's a WellArchitected framework for AWS, Google, and Azure, and it's roughly the same. And all it's different, but it's kind of the same in all three. I kind of prefer the AWS one because I'm biased, but I just think it's slightly cleaner. But they're all three are equally as good. Like they just have three slightly different approaches, which is another whole conversation itself.
They all have the 5 pillars: security, operational excellence, reliability, performance optimization, and cost optimization. And even if you don't have a cloud solution, the well-architected framework and approach and the questions, if you take the question set, maybe not so much the answer, you can apply that sort of assessment to any workload, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. So it's a very valuable framework for any team to have a look at and see how they can learn, measure, and improve using some of the stuff that's available within it.
Cool. I'm just conscious of time there. If there's any final questions, we'll kind of start our kind of wind down, and we can take a couple of comments and questions as we kind of start doing this. So a couple of, as you can tell, we're just kind of kicking a few ideas around, but this, for me, I think this is a fascinating topic, and it's not as much, okay, we're going to go to the cloud. It's like, well, why are you going to the cloud? What do you want from it? What are the attributes? Are you looking for speed, innovation, security? You got to answer those questions. And serverless may not be the right direction, but it's as providers improve the serverless offering more and more, there's a lot of the myths are starting to go away. Things like cold starts, long runner processes, storage options, they're all starting to go away. Developer environment, observability, they're knocking those off at a rate. So we have seen actually considerable improvement in the serverless offering. Lambda was launched in 2014. We put our first Lambdas in production in start of 2015. It was a bit kind of funky back then, but we have seen huge improvements over the last 5 years with serverless, and I do believe now it's prime time. It definitely is.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've matured significantly around observability, around monitoring, around the patterns that we deploy now, the automation that we have brought to bear, and like we've mentioned earlier, we can literally deploy a full serverless solution in minutes to a deployed environment, and then minutes later have that deployed into production. And serverless has really been the vehicle that's enabled us to do that.
It's also actually a really good environment for engineers to work in. It's something that we didn't expect. Teams are super engaged. They just feel that they have power tools at their fingertips and they're getting a lot of work done. There's less repetitive, silly stuff. I know been an engineer for years. When you're working in an environment that's not effective, you know about it. You know you're doing things that are taking you ages that you should be able to do fast, and it's frustrating. So people are able to do things really quickly, and they enjoy it.
And we have a rule of thumb around everything should be Googleable.
Googleable.
That's a word. I'm paraphrasing it here. I'm claiming that one. Because all these capabilities have been democratized, because they're the cloud providers are putting on YouTube videos, the blogs, the community is contributing so much. You should be able to Google for some of this stuff and be able to apply it within your enterprise or your company. And that's where we try to get away from building abstraction layers that are just tailored for us. We want to be using a lot of these capabilities that the cloud providers are providing without putting those code liabilities on top of it that we have to look after.
Yeah, for sure. So a couple of sites there. that I think are interesting. We've got the serverlessage.com, which is a blog that we just started up. Off by None, which is a newsletter by a guy called Jeremy Daly, who's one of the kind of serverless heroes. It comes out weekly. It's brilliant. There's lots of stuff in there. CDK Patterns by our own Matt Coulter. It's got about, I think, about 20 patterns. Many of them are serverless using CDK. It's brilliant to get started, and you can contribute your own. So don't be greedy. Go in there, have a look at it, and contribute something. It'd be great. Virtualserverlessdays.io. As you know, we ran Serverless Days Belfast back in January. What was it? 2019.
Yep.
2020.
Okay.
I can't even remember now. And so a lot of the Serverless Days events now have gone virtual. So they have an event every 3 months where all the speakers go virtual, and that's all those talks are recorded. So go in there, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. There's also a nice YouTube channel with loads of talks. The nice thing about Serverless is the community is still quite small.
Yeah.
So it's still very accessible. They plug in the experts and see what's happening.
Yeah.
And then finally, biased Wardley maps. It's a good way of thinking to get into. They kind of tighten up your doctrine and where you're going. Good stuff. And again, any sort of final comments, please jump in. So kind of right, how do I work this? Okay.
Is it working? There we go.
There we go. So for us, and again, I honestly don't mean this as a sales pitch, but the thing that we have figured out, and this, feel free to steal this, fill your boots up. We've been kicking around how do we get here, and there's a couple of layers that we have found, and for us, we have this idea of a high performance serverless first team, and it's those 4 things, and I'll start from the bottom, right? Because that's the way we've kind of went at it, but it reads top down. High performance engineering, that's really the DORA metric. High throughput of work, high stability system. That's your 2 things. Go fast and go securely. That's the core of engineering, right? That's just straight software engineering. That's just a mindset. You can do that in any environment. Then you layer on WellArchitected, right? So WellArchitected has the 5 pillars: your operational excellence, reliability, security, cost optimization, and operational excellence. Yeah. So that's the 5 pillars of WellArchitected. So you're continuous optimizing code cost, and you're secure by design. So you're thinking about the kind of, it's effectively the non-functional requirements.
Yeah.
Then you layer on the serverless first kind of way of thinking. And really that is, and the way I think of this is, traditionally you would have built applications kind of like layers and have a synchronous kind of call stack going through them. Now you start building asynchronous with event-driven and strong APIs. You start becoming domain-driven and having APIs, and you start to shrink down your kind of blast radius. Think about more like patches of functionality rather than a big kind of stack. So it's effectively breaking down the monolith, but you're specifically being event-driven, because in a service environment, you've no other choice. It has to be asynchronous. And then that idea of your rent reusing. So build is the last thing you do. You want to, what can I reuse or rent that's out there? We need to build an XYZ. Let's just call that service. The goal is to build as little as possible. And then finally at the top, and this is the question that any team should be able to answer: what's your KPI? What business outcome are you chasing? And you should be building solutions that fits in the heads of your team. If you have a team that are building a solution that's so big that their heads explode trying to think about it, you're doing something wrong. And if you have a team that don't know what their business outcome is, their KPIs, then they're not thinking properly. So I think we have what that is from the bottom and worked our way up. But now, this is the way we think of what our high performance service first team should be.
Yeah.
And for us, that's engineering excellence.
Absolutely. And we use team a lot. It's not about, hero programmers or 10x programmers or any of that stuff. It's about the team. We're big fans of team topologies. We truly believe that the team is the fundamental unit of delivery. So it's all about making the team high performing. It's about making sure that the team have all the capabilities, expertise, and skills they need to be successful. And with the serverless first approach, we are seeing fantastic success across large parts of our organization.
Cool. Any final any feedback or comments on that, or happy to we'll try and close up a minute or 2 early, give people quick break between sessions, but anything anybody wants to throw in there as we close out? And please feel free to hit any of us up, myself or Mark, on Twitter, or even follow the Liberty thingy there.
Yep. We are biased, but we believe this has been revolutionary for how we deliver software and how we build solutions for our customers. It really has revolutionized how we do our work.
Yeah, it's something that it's an ongoing joke Mark and I have, is that you could actually create a company now with 3 developers, where previously you would have had it like 150.
Yeah.
We haven't actually done that yet, but I think you could.
Awesome. Give it one more minute, and then.
All right. Yeah, we'll give it another minute, but I think that's us. Again, I don't want to keep people too long, but like I say, I'll leave this board here for another day or two. So by all means, if you want to take a grab of it, or even go for it. If you want to shoot me a DM or anything, please feel free to outside this. Again, like, we're super passionate about this. It's not just because it's what we do at Liberty. Is we actually think this is genuinely a paradigm shift and it's groundbreaking. So there's lots of stuff in the industry, if you look out for it, around this. Like, so it's a super exciting. I think it's a super exciting time to be a software engineer, because the tools you have at your fingertips are better than they've ever been.
Yeah, team autonomy has gone through the roof. The teams can be really autonomous, and they can. A team of 4 or 5 can now deliver what teams of 30 or 40 used to deliver in the past.
So maybe we'll finish with a story. My wife Trassa, she was looking at something on the I think it was BBC story the other day about, I think it was the NHS or someone, and they were talking about using the cloud for digital transformation. And the net result was now they could now exchange images with each other. That's a great example of companies not using the cloud properly. Like, the cloud isn't just a cheaper data center; it should actually transform your business properly. So if you do use it properly, then there is untold potential. But unfortunately for me, I think a lot of people just think of the cloud as just a slightly different data center, which is completely missing the point. And I think that misunderstanding will be around many companies for a long, long time yet, because it is a complex area, but it's exciting.
Yep.
All right, folks, we'll leave it at that. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. Good session. And again, if you want to leave any feedback or comments, go for it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.